Check 1, 2. Check, check. Check 1, 2. Check.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm going to just invite folks to come, maybe come on Chodesh Tov, just to come one row forward. We got, I know some more folks are moseying in. I said to Yael, it's hard to separate Jews from their food, so people are slowly trickling in. But come, let's gather more toward the front and be together. And welcome. So I'm Shuli Passo, for those who don't know me. Really delighted to have the opportunity to learn today from Yael Yechieli and her work. The first thing that I noticed when you sent me your bio was that Yael is an optimist by choice. I don't know if Felicia said that when she introduced you in the service. That just really stood out to me because it's very easy to choose not to be an optimist, I think. Unfortunately, it feels like it's easier to choose not to be an optimist. But we have to do it. We have to work that muscle to choose to be optimistic, to be hopeful, and which means not just emotionally, but to do the work. As you heard, if you were in the service today, Yael is someone who has certainly done the work, founding most recently the 50-50 Partnership for Gender Equality, which you're going to hear a lot about today, on October 7th, founding Ha'ogen, the anchor of a nationwide volunteer network supporting families of those in Miluim, the reservists. And prior to that, living in California and being one of the founders of Unacceptable, which if you were paying attention back before October 7th, when there were other things that the country was going through, was a massive global network of Israelis who were working to organize and speak out against what was happening in the government with the judicial reforms and all of that. So, and much, much more. But I don't want to spend time. We're here to learn from you. So welcome. We're really glad that you're here. And Yael's going to speak, and then we'll have some time for Q&A afterwards. Welcome.
Thank you, Shuli, and thank you for inviting me to be part. And I'm thinking like where to start. So I'm from Israel. I'm from Jerusalem, and by saying that I'm optimistic, as a gender equality activist, it's easy to be optimistic, because when we look about ourselves and our grandmothers, we see the gap, right? And we see what changed in the world, and it didn't change by itself. It never happens because people just wanted, or women wanted the same rights. They wanted the same rights, but then the next step was the answer, no, right? Every right women were struggling for, the first answer was no, but they fight for it, and then they won. And when we look back 100 years ago and we said, how come women didn't have the right to vote, right? That doesn't make any sense. When I tell my kids about it, really? Women didn't have a right to vote? But when we look into history, we know that it was a struggle of 70 years. Okay, till women got the right to vote, and this is one of my thoughts how to become an optimist, is to look back and then say, okay, we're in a better situation than it was 100 years ago. But then I look to the future and I'm asking myself, what do I need to do in order that the future will be better than our situation? So when I need to identify myself, I always say that I'm an activist. And for being activist, you need three things. One is to be angry. Is there anyone here who's angry? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So being angry is energy. And it's energy that we can use in order to change things. And there's other people, I call them the I don't care people. Do you know them? That everything, I don't care, I don't care. And these people won't change anything in the world because they don't care. But for me, as an activist, I'm looking what I'm angry about, and the next step is asking, what is my vision? Okay? I'm angry about something in reality. But then I need to think, what is my vision? What do I want to change? And maybe the most important thing is to have a plan how to get there. Okay, so I'll speak today about this angriness and then a vision and then how to get there. I do want to say that we're here in New York. I'm going back tonight to Jerusalem, but like this hours, it's the hours usually like Motzei Shabbat in Israel, Shabbat, Saturday night, that I'm in the streets, me and my friends and my family and my colleagues, like saying like there's an action. We are angry. We are angry that this is our government. We are angry that there's 59 hostages that are still in Gaza. Some of them are alive. And we can't sit at home. And people ask me, what does it help that you are going to demonstrations? And it's a good question, right? Because at the end of the day, we are not the people who are doing the deal, right? Like there's others. But when we go out, we are just saying we care and we know we can change the system. Okay, we can change it. And we saw when the hostages came back, they said, some of them said that they saw news once in a while, and they saw the demonstrations, and they knew that people are fighting for them. And for me, even though sometimes I think it does nothing as like for the deal, maybe that's not the thing that will bring the next deal, but if there's one hostage that saw the news today and saw that I'm demonstrating for him or her, I'm like, okay, that's enough for me for going out week after week for, like from the war started October 7th, but we were in the streets a year before, every Saturday demonstrating and fighting for democracy. Because also democracy, and I think we know today, not only in Israel, that democracy is in crisis, okay? And if we won't do anything, it could get worse. And what is the thing that we need to do? It's a question. And there's lots of options. And I always say we don't know which option will be the best. I know what I am doing, but I know that I'm a person that is doing in order to change and to make things better. So this is me as an activist, and I came here today to tell also about the initiative I founded called the 50-50, and about gender equality struggle in Israel. And I do want to start from reality. We are now in a war, and I think there's no way to look at a war without thinking about it genderly, okay? Because the people who are deciding about this war are mostly men who are sitting in the cabinet or sitting in the government, and we can't hear women's voices. And it was like that throughout history, okay? It's not a new thing. But the new thing is that we see it today, and some of us say, oh, that's not okay. Okay, that's not okay that these are the people who are deciding about this war. And I want to bring 3 gender views of this war. I have, yeah, you can just give it out. The first one, in October 7th, after a few days of really like a big, big mess, we started hearing about the female soldiers, they call the tatzpitaniyot, the observants, how do you? Spotters, okay? They are the ones who are sitting on the border, And they were sitting on the border and warning and saying, we see in our eyes, because that's what was their job. It's a big question why mostly female soldiers do this work. It's a question, but it is. It's called the tatzpitaniot. It's like in gender-wise. And they say, we see something bad is going on the border, but they were not heard. And then we are asking, who was the people who were supposed to hear them? And we realize it's mostly the officers, and they were mostly men. So, and this is the first article I brought here. Is that they were Israelis' eyes on the border, but the Hamas warning went unheard. Okay, they were raising their voice, they were warning, but they were not heard. Is it because they were women? I don't know. I know that at the end of the day, they were women and the officers were men, and they were warning and they were not heard. And we know in history we have other stories like that, that women are warning, but they are not being heard. And they are also not being heard because in the cabinet, again, there's mostly men who are sitting there and who are talking with each other, and we're not hearing the female soldiers. Something that I can say about this war is, in a way, it's the war that the most percentage of women, female, took part of. And that's why, because the IDF in the last 20 years opened lots of, how do you say, chilot, as a duties that you can do as a female, because when I was 18, most of the things they couldn't do. But today, when you get your 18, and you also if you are a woman, you can go to a lot of places. And this is something that changed. But also I can say about the army, it didn't change because they were sitting there saying, let's give the women to be in the Air Force. It wasn't like that. It was always a struggle. And the next article I wrote here was about the Iran attack. Okay, a few months ago, Israel attacked Iran, and the Air Force was very, very proud that there's 4 female pilots on this attack. And I was calling a friend of mine called Alice Miller, and when she was 18, she wanted to go to be a pilot. Why? Because she wanted to be a pilot. Happens, right? And then she went to the IDF saying, I want to be a pilot. And the answer was, no, you can't be a pilot because you are not a man. Okay? And then she went to the Supreme Court and said, it's a democratic state. It's not supposed to be like that, and I want to have the option to be a pilot. And the Supreme Court went to the IDF and to the state and asked, why is it the law today that men can be pilots and women cannot be pilots? And then the IDF explained, they cannot do it because of, but at the end of the day, the Supreme Court told the IDF, there's no reason that we will not be pilots. And from that point, and actually in November 2025, I hope we are going to do an event because it's going to be 30 years for this, from this struggle. And when I saw this article saying, we are so proud that 4 female pilots were part of the attack, I was like, it also didn't happen by itself, right? It's not that when Alice Miller say, I want to be a pilot, the answer was, yeah, that's a good idea. Why we didn't think about it? No, the answer was no. And then only because the struggle, the law changed, and today we have female pilots in the Air Force, and we have like this article or this IDF and also the government so proud. And this is something I can say about like, women's rights struggles. When we look back, it looks like, that makes really sense. But when we are on the stage, the answer is no. Okay, there's no struggle that didn't get the answer no at the beginning. But that's supposed to give us strength to continue struggling. And this is my optimism, okay? Like because I say, like, so many struggles succeed, so we'll succeed also, but we have to fight. So this is two ways of talking about this war in a gender way, but I want also to talk about the struggle for bringing back the hostages. Because if you, I don't know, like if you know, I'll tell you, but the people who are in the front of this struggle mostly are the moms. And it's a big question why the moms are the ones that are struggling for bringing back their kids. I'm sure the dads also want their kids back, right? So why is it a struggle of moms? And this is the third article. Hostage mothers lead silent protest hostages return out of Prime Minister office. But there is a big demonstrations of women who are doing these demonstrations for bringing back the hostages. And I can say that personally, I think it's bad, okay? It shouldn't be by gender. It should be everyone, men and women, dads and moms, fighting for the hostages to come back. But I think when they decided about the idea of the moms, it was because of the thought that maybe this emotionally will make the difference of the decisions. Like when you see the moms, it will make them. I hope this is the reason, and not gender thoughts. But when I look about this war, it's also because that's what I'm doing. I'm doing everything through gender. But I think that it's hard not to see this war without asking questions about gender and looking in the gender length about this war. So we see lots of women volunteering in this war, and we see lots of female soldiers fighting in this war. And we see in the struggles lots of women. But where do we not see women? In the decision-making tables about this war. Okay? And this is a gap. As for myself, I founded 50/50 the day after the last elections in Israel. We had elections in 2022, the November 1st, 2022. I saw the numbers. I saw that for the first time, the number of women Knesset members is going down. It was the first time that the number of ministers, female ministers in the government of Israel is going down. So Bibi was elected on November 1st, 2022, and I founded the 50/50 initiative November 2nd, 2022, okay? Because when I'm angry, okay, I know I need a vision and then a plan how to change it. So I can say that the vision of 50/50 I got way before, and also I wrote the plan to get to 50/50 before November 2022. But these elections were the ones that was like a call for me saying, now it's the time to found this 50/50 initiative with the vision, the simple vision of 50% women in all decision-making tables. And it's really simple, right? It's right, 50% women in all the decision, because we are 50% people in the public, right? Everywhere. So how come the people who are deciding about this, about all of us, are mostly men? But when we look in history, that was a situation throughout the history. But I can say that one of the places I was looking for when I started to to research about 50-50 was Mexico. Mexico got in 2018 to 50% women in the parliament. Yeah? And I thought the only states that have 50-50 are Norway or Finland. And I said, okay, we have nothing between Norway, Finland, and Israel, right? Like it's not the same. But Mexico, not far, okay? And then when I realized that Mexico got to 50-50, I was like, okay, I have to learn how did Mexico get to 50-50 and what happened after and what happened before. And then I need to translate it to Hebrew and to Israel politic system. Because if Mexico got to 50-50, so it means that we can do it also. And I started my research when we were in Berkeley. And then I realized that the first country that got to 50-50, you know which country is it? Which was the first country in the world that got to 50-50? Guesses? Not Denmark, not Iceland, but Rwanda. Okay? And I saw that and I was like, what? So Rwanda is more than 20 years already with 50% women in the parliament. And the reason is very tragic. Okay? The reason it's not a good way to get to 50-50. Okay? They had a war between two tribes and they killed each other. They killed 700,000 people in a year. Okay? And what happened that most of the politicians went to the war or were part of the war, and most of the politicians were killed because that's what the people do in a war, right? But because there was a lack of people in the government because they went for the war, so women started to take care for their small village because all the men went to the army. So they started, and some of them were illiterate, like they didn't know how to read, or because there's no law at that time that girls should have to go to school, only boys have to go to school on that time in Rwanda. But they started leading their small communities because there's no one else. So if there's no one else, and then they started to work in politics in big cities. And after a few years, there was the first elections in Rwanda after this genocide, 2004, and 50% women were elected to the parliament. And one of the first laws was a law saying in all decision-making tables should be 50% women. And that's why for the last 20 years in Rwanda, this is the situation. So also for me was like, okay, Rwanda got to 50-50, Israel can do it too. But not in that way, okay? We don't need to kill people for that. And I can say that things that there were changed in Rwanda in the last 20 years is, for example, the education system is today for boys, it's chova, obligated for boys and girls from the age of 6 till the age of 18. And this is one of the changes they do once there's 50% women in the parliament. So this is the law they passed. And also there's they say like there's two budgets that change dramatically in this last 20 years. It's health budget and education budget. Did the men 30 years ago were not interested in health or education? I don't know. But the result is that once women were 50% of the parliament in Rwanda, the two budgets that they moved was the health and the education. So it's not only about the number, it's about what you are doing when you are sitting in this tables. And this gave me the idea that if Israel will have 50% women in the parliament, the laws will look different, and then reality will look different, right? Because it goes together. So I had this vision, and I started writing the work plan, how to get to 50-50. And then we came back to Israel, and I started trying to get there. And actually, this week, we had a very big step. You can see in the other, you can turn the paper, because the article is from February 25, 2025, this week. State did not meet its obligation for equal representation of women. High Court. Few of the organizations that I'm part of also, we went to the Supreme Court 2 years ago and said, we are looking on the government and we are looking on the government officers, and we see that there's no women there. Like they, they pointed only men for the highest positions in most of the offices. And the law in Israel say you have, there is a law for equal representation, but there's no one who are keeping this law. So we went to the Supreme Court, and it took 2 years. But today, this week, the Supreme Court told the government, you need to answer how come in all the highest positions in Israel, there's only men. And the government has 6 months to answer. So we'll need to wait. I'm not so optimistic about that, okay? But the thing is that what I'm looking for is not this government. With this government, we won't do a lot about gender equality, and we won't do a lot about other things also. Okay, this government doesn't care from this thing. But I'm looking what's going to happen in the next elections and in the next government. And I think, and what we are doing now is to bring all the tools we have in order that when there will be elections, we'll change the law and we'll change the system in order that women will be in the the highest political positions. So this is a good news from this week. We didn't know if the Supreme Court will go with us. I'll tell you honestly, because it's a very tricky issue, but we are happy for that. And when I'm looking in the history in Israel, from 1948, women were not part of the government for most of the years of Israel, as you see in the graph here. Okay, this is the graph of female ministers in Israel government from 1948 till 2022. And as you see, in 1948, there was one. Who was she? Golda. And then in 1952, there's also one. Who is she? Golda. And for 25 years, there was only one woman in the government of Israel, and it was Golda. And that's a dynamic we know also, like we see in researches like that, if there's only one woman, mostly she doesn't change the system. Okay, so that, I know lots of people are angry about Golda, about lots of things, because always when a woman gets to a high position, people are angry about her. But I understand why Golda didn't do a lot about it. Okay, but the only reason that Golda was a minister in 1948 was that few weeks before Israel was founded, the women's organizations, the Hadassah, Naamat, Vitzo, wrote a letter to Ben-Gurion asking him, when we'll have a government in the new state, please, we want to have also women in the government. And Ben-Gurion answered, and because everything was letters and not emails, so we can see it today, okay? And there is the answer that Ben-Gurion gives the women's organization in 1948, saying, I promise that in my new government and in our new state, women will be part of the government. But he didn't promise how many, okay? And that's why we had one. And I, like in my vision, I'm saying, what would happen in 1948 if Ben-Gurion was promising 50% women in all the parliament, like in the new government of Israel, and how would the Israeli history will look if there will be 50% women from 1948? But this is, again, that's only like fiction. It's not reality. But Israel was one of the first governments in the world that had a female minister. And this is only because of the women's organization like standing there and say, and I'll say a good word for Ben-Gurion, he didn't say no. He said, yes, I'll do that. Because he was really a very big feminist as a person. So that's why there was only one. But as we see throughout the history of the government of Israel, usually there was only one. Okay, this was the political system, and this was the political system that I grew up to. That it makes sense, okay, there's only one. And when I grew up, I found myself asking, why is there only one woman in the government? How come? Like, women are 50%, right? So how come there's only one woman? And then I did like the research, understanding what happened and how did it get the point. But as you see here, in 2013 was the first time we got to a point with 4 female ministers. And from that point, we went up, right? It's 4, then it's 6, then it's 8, then it's 9. And it was like, wow, we are on the way to 50-50, right? And then we had the elections of November 2022, and we see this going down, and that's the point when I founded 50-50. Because I'm saying we could be on this path to get to 50% women, but it won't happen by itself. We need to do actions. And one of the actions that I realized happened in other places, and we need to do also in Israel, is that all parties have to have 50% women. Because if you have, okay, in the United States you have only 2 parties, but we're talking about Israel, that every elections we have like 20 parties. But we have parties with women. We have one party that have 50% women. This is the Labor, but there are only 4 candidates like in the parliament. But we need all the parliaments to have 50% women. And I knew that there's 2 ways to get there. And I'm saying we will get there. The question is not how, the question is when. Okay? We will get there. And like for me, it's something that like I wake up in the morning and that's my thought. How are we going to get to 50% women in the parliament? And I realized a few things. One, we need public pressure. Okay? We need the public to hold this vision and think this is a good vision. And that's why I'm going like throughout Israel and here, like talking about the vision. We need people that hold this vision, say 50% women in all political positions is a good thing. It can help us. These days, it can help us. And after we'll have this public pressure and public opinion, the next step will be to have regulation. And there is a way to do regulation because they did this regulation in Mexico, they did this regulation in New Zealand, they did this regulation in Spain. There is regulation that's moving us to 50% women, and we need this regulation also in Israel. And I didn't know when's the next elections, because in Israel, we never know when's the next elections. It's supposed to be 2026, and I founded 50-50 in 2022. So I said, okay, what I'm going to do from now till 2026, or whenever will be the elections. And then I saw that we have a municipal elections. In Israel, we have municipal elections divided from the central elections. Every 5 years, we have municipal elections. And I decided to start the 50-50 initiative with the municipal elections. And I took the data, and I saw that there were lots of female candidates like that were supposed to be, like that they were part of the elections 2013 and 2018. And I say, how come there were so many women who were part, but they didn't get in? And the answer was that in every party, or in every liberal party, there were men and women, but the men were at the top of the list, and the women were on the bottom of the list. And if you get in only 4 places, and the first places are men, so you get not equal council. And what I did, people joined 50-50. I told them, we have a plan, join 50-50, and I'll give you the work plan. And the work plan was this. I live in Jerusalem. I went to the mayor of Jerusalem, Moshe Leon, and I asked him. He came to our neighborhood. I came there. He wants me to vote for him, right? That's why he came to the neighborhood. And I raised my hand and asked, Moshe Leon, do you have 50% women in your list? And he said, yes, of course. So, what numbers? I don't know. Okay? And the next day, he's going to another neighborhood, and I'm calling my friend who's living there. I told her, go and ask him if he has 50% women and what numbers. And on that stage, I called it the zipper list. Do you have a zipper list? In Hebrew, it's richrach. Okay, do you have like a man, woman? And she did the same. And he said, I don't know. The next day, he went to another neighborhood. Another friend of mine raised her hand. And for 3 weeks, everywhere he went, he got the same question. Do you have 50% women? And if this a zipper list? And after 3 weeks, one of his workers called me, said, Yael, we are doing 50% women, and it will be a zipper list. You can stop. Okay? And I said, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to tell everyone that the mayor of Jerusalem is doing 50% women in his list, and it's going to be a zipper. And as we did it in Jerusalem, I had 60 groups from all over, 60 cities in Israel, that they called 50-50 Ra'anana, 50-50 Herzliya, 50-50 Rehovot, and they went to every politician and asked the same question. Do you have 50% women, and if this is a zipper list? And we got to a point that a week before, I got all the data, and we realized that we have hundreds of lists all over Israel with 50% women in a zipper list. And there was elections, and I was very curious to know what's going on. And then we started to get the results, and I get a message saying, our city is 50-50. We got to the point of 50-50. And then another city, and today there's 20 cities in Israel with 50% women in the municipal council, okay? And again, it's because I was really angry, and then a vision, and then a working plan, how to get there. Okay, this question, do you have 50% women with a zipper list? That was the question which changed, and again, no regulation. It's all because of public pressure for these politicians saying, we want to get to a 50-50 municipal council. And I can say that today it's a year after the elections, and we get almost every week news from other places in Israel that they did actions in order to do gender equality in their city, because there's more women in the municipal councils. So the budget for sports for girls, we saw that's going up, okay? And we see changes of names of streets, because most of the streets in Israel, we don't have numbers like here, okay? We have names Ben Yehuda, Ben Gurion, yeah? And we have only 6% of the roads are after women, although we are 50% of the world, right? So in these municipalities, when they have a vote of what names will be the roads, so there's more roads today in Israel that's called a road of Golda Meir, for example, or I really want that we'll have in Jerusalem a road named after Ruth Bader Ginsburg, so we're trying to do that, okay? But the thing is that it's people who decide what will be the names of the roads. And if in the municipal council there's 50% women, so we'll get for more roads that named after women. So this is our example. Again, it's not only the number 50-50. It's an actions and budget that change because there's 50% women there. And this is what we're doing like for the last year. The next step is convincing the big parties that, like in the Knesset, to do it 50%. It won't be easy. It's not like doing it in the municipal elections, because in the municipal election, when the mayor came to our neighborhood, he needs me there, okay? He needs me to vote for him, so he heard me more. And, you know, like the politicians of the big parties will have to work very hard, so they'll listen and they'll decide to do 50-50. But I can say that we are working on it, okay? This is the goal for the next, and this is what time for 50-50, it's our mission. This is what we put them in the social media whenever they talk about something. You should have 50-50 in your party. And if all the liberal, and we'll start with the liberal parties, will have 50-50, we'll get more Knesset members in the next elections, and then we can do regulations for these parties that would never do 50-50 if there's no regulation. Okay, so this is the work plan. And this is like trying to tell the story of 50-50 in 40 minutes. And that's it. So in a minute, I'll take a question. And I put here like a way that you can learn more about 50-50, and if you want to support 50-50. And I also, you can take a magnet home with the quote, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made." And this is the quote of Ruth Bader Ginsburg that for me was like one of the 10 commandments, okay? Like saying, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to change. I want women to be in the places where decisions are being made, because I think, and I know that the decisions will be different once there will be 50% women in these tables. So when you go home, you can take. You wanted to ask something? Yeah.
You explained very clearly about how Rwanda got more women in government. What happened in Mexico?
Yeah, Mexico, it started from public opinion, okay, and from organizations and human rights organizations that they knew that, you know, Mexico is very corrupted, right? And one of the things that we know that when there's more women, it's not that women are not corrupted, but when there's more women, the dynamic changes. And so it was mostly the women's organizations in Mexico and human rights organizations that decided that this is a goal for them and this is a vision. And they started with, again, the same, like that's what I'm doing. I follow them. They started with the liberal parties, and they did a big campaign in the liberal parties that the liberal parties should have 50% women. And there was one election, I think 2007, that there were 25% women got in the parliament, and then they had a law saying every party has to have 30% women, okay? And this is, again, where I took my plan from. Yeah, but Mexico could do today is 50-50. As we know, they have a woman as a president, Claudia Sheinbaum, and she's Jewish, and the Jewish community is angry about that. Everything is normal, okay? But she became a prime minister, like a president, to a parliament with 50% women, okay? Yeah, so read about it. And I heard about her a few years ago, and I read things that she's writing and reading. Follow her, also in the social media. I think she's very, very smart. She's not mushlemet. She's not perfect, but I don't know anyone who's perfect. Mostly not in politics, okay? And that has nothing to do with gender, okay? One of the big problems of democracy, as we know it, that not the best people are going to politics. You realized it, right? Yeah. We didn't find a way to bring the best people to politics. Not men and not women. And what I'm saying, when there will be 50% men and 50% women, the dynamic will change. At the end of the day, we can't know who will be the one person who will be there. But I know that the dynamic changes when there's 50% women. Okay? Yes?
You know, a few years ago, this would have been amazing. The sad thing is that you may as well be a representative of the United States, because that's where we're headed, downward. The situation of women in the United States, and it was said by the new Secretary of Defense, is to have less women. So your coming here now is great, but it would have been wonderful you were here 5 years ago or 6 months ago. But right now, we're headed in that direction, except it's reverse direction. And I would say to you, we have to be careful. Other countries, such as the old-time communist countries, think about this. In China, in Russia, if you look at the leadership, it was usually 50% women. Look at the Cultural Revolution in China. During that time, 50% women were leading. So we're not so great. And all I'm saying to you is thank you for being here, but I wish you were here, 6 months ago, but we need someone like you maybe going to other countries talking about our country and getting more women, because we're headed the other way.
Yeah, so I think I'll tell you a few things. One is, I think one of the problems that happened here by politics is it was about the one person on the head and not about the party, okay? And this is something that when I speak here with people from the Democratic Party, I say, you need a new vision for the Democratic Party and stop talking about the one person, because it didn't work. And if the Democratic Party will have a new vision, for example, of 50% women in all the Democratic Party, and not talking about the one, it can be the change. And I'm here today because you invited me today, not 6 years ago. But I didn't have 50-50 6 years ago. And I'll say also about 50-50 doesn't change everything, okay? It's not that it's the best solution for everything, but as I see it, when I look on the political system, it's a way to make more democracy. It doesn't mean that every place that will have 50% women will be more democratic, but so maybe in Japan, I don't think in Japan they have 50, as I know they have today like 10% of women, but we need to have an answer as a system, and to change the system in order to change the law, in order to change the democratic. So I'm saying, like, if I'll find another solution, for example, how to get the best people to politics. So I'll throw 50-50, okay? But I didn't find another solution for that. And I can say that a year after the municipal councils, and I can say in Israel that that's the place that gives me optimistic view, because I saw what happened in the last year in most of these municipal councils, and things were different. And actually, on Friday, I got a message from a friend of mine in Sderot. Sderot, they had elections only now because they were in the war. Like, there's still war, but they're now. And she told me for the first time, the mayor of Sderot appointed a woman to be a CEO of the Sderot. And she said, it's the first time in Sderot that there's a woman who will be in the head of Sderot. And okay, so I'm optimistic. It can happen. If it's in Sderot, it happened. It can be in other places. Do you have another question? Or shall I wrap up? Like, I can talk about it for hours, so but it's Shabbat, you have to sleep.
Thank you very much for coming and telling us this. Couple of thoughts. One is that the image that I have, and I think many others have, of Mexico is a place where there's a certain element of machismo. So it's fascinating to think, and would love to know more, how that kind of a society would move to 50-50. In our country, we saw a huge move in the Latino population voting for Donald Trump in the last election, in the male population. But the other question, the question I want to pose to you is, are there polls in Israel that give you a sense of where the public stands with this? What do they say?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. The polls, and we have people who like asking this question about what do you think about the idea of 50% women in the parliament. And as we see, obviously in the left wing, like, people think it's a good idea, but we also see in the ultra-Orthodox and the National Zionism parties, people that say, yeah, this is a good idea. And I think it's a change after October 7th. Like, seeing this government, this mostly men government, taking bad decisions for Israel, change the thought of the public opinion about that. So the answer is yes. The other side is that the politicians are not there yet, okay? And I go to the Knesset every week, and I speak to politicians every week, and they don't understand yet how much it's important, and this is part of my job, to explain them. But the public opinion did change, and I'll say tragically, also because of this war.
Are you saying across the political spectrum,
Yeah.
the ultra-Orthodox and the left, people?
Yeah. I can say about the ultra-Orthodox that in these municipal elections was the first time that 14 ultra-Orthodox women were part of the elections for the first time. Only 2 of them got into one in Ra'anana and one in Bet Shemesh. But it was the first time that ultra-Orthodox women were part of the elections system, okay? So hopefully it will be hard. I'll say truthfully, as for the ultra-Orthodox parties, there's 2 scenarios. One, by regulation, like that there will be a regulation that every party has to have 30% women, but then they need to be, that these parties will not be part of the government, so we can pass this law. And the other thing is today, like for years, we have 2 big parties, the Sephardi and the Ashkenazi, Yahadut HaTorah and Shas, and there is a plan to build another, a new party, Haredi, more liberal, ultra-Orthodox party, and this is also an option. Again, I don't know who will vote, but this is, and like I say, as for politics, we are mostly think that what happened will be the future also. But as politics, it's always changing for good and bad, okay? And that's why I can be optimistic about politics, because it can change Like I'm saying here, it can change in 4 years, it can change in 2 years, in like the middle election, like things can change. But it won't change if people don't do actions and work for it to change. Okay, so we'll take the last question you have.
My name is Yael,
Ah, okay, Israeli.
and thank you for saying this hard to pronounce name so nicely.
Think about Yael Yechieli.
Yeah, yeah, that must be hard. So my background is finance. I'm a CPA, and I used to be a senior banker all my life. And when I transitioned from the corporate world, I decided to go to real estate. I'm an investor. I'm doing a lot of things, but I wanted to focus on women. Helping women to get to have some wealth, to own their own apartments, and I talk about it a lot. And I speak about the position of women in boards and in managements of companies, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, and Tel Aviv 125, and the situation is not as as bad and not as good. It's 8% more or less
That's bad.
of women. Yeah, and
It's better than 10 years ago, but it's still bad.
exactly. And I do believe that money is also, it's not only freedom, it's also the ability to influence and make decisions. And what I hear a lot from people is, but are there enough women who want to be in those positions? And it's very hard to answer the question, but the real question is, what do we do in order to implant the self-confidence in young women and make them believe that they can be the CEO, the chairman of the board, or a minister? Because as it looks right now, I think the confidence is not there, and most women, they don't even have the aspiration to be in those high positions.
Yeah, so it's a good point, and I want to give a little story about it. I have a friend that she's a principal of a school, an elementary school, and they have in the school the student council. And every year, every class has to appoint one student to this council. And she told me every year, mostly boys are the representatives. And she said, I'm trying to convince the girls to go for it, and they don't do that. And she told me, what can I do? And I told her two things. One, in Hebrew, when you say the students' council, you can't say students, that like you need to say genderly, because even if in Hebrew everything is genderly, right? As a mo'etzet talmidim. I told her, change the word to mo'etzet talmidot v'talmidim, the councils of the boys and the girls, students. But then other things do. And say that for 1 year we are doing, we want to check something. And every class has to send 2 students, 50-50. 1 boy and 1 a girl. And she said, like, all of a sudden, in all classes, the girls wanted to be in the council because they knew they have a good chance that they will be elected. And that's what they did. And she called me, like, happily, said, like, really, it worked. It worked. The girls wanted to be part. But if a year before it was all the most popular boy in class or one of the girls, like, she didn't want to be part of it. So she said, okay. She voted also for this populist boy. But when the system said 50-50, all of a sudden, girls wanted to be part. And I'm saying it, that's why I'm dealing mostly with the system and not with the women. Because the women in Mexico, they don't have more confidence than the women in Israel or in the United States, right? Like, it's not because they changed their confidence. The system in Mexico is a system that's saying by law, every party has to have, today it's 40% women, and that's why there's 40% women. Also, when I look in the municipal elections, it's not that women were not part of the municipal elections. They were part, but the list was men Like the system was that men were in their positions and the women were. So it's right that we need to educate the next generation. But education, as we know, takes long time. But this principle, she changed the education in a way, telling these students, every class has one boy, one girl, and then the council was 50% girls. And another thing, she called me a few months after and said, every year, after a few months, some of these populist boys retire, okay? Like they were voted, they were fighting for, like, vote for me there, but after a few weeks, like they don't want to come anymore, okay? Because it's coming after the hours of school, like you don't get lots of benefits. Also, as a politician, you don't get lots of benefits, okay? So they retired. And she said, like, you fighted that to be part of this council. Why are you retiring now? And she said that on that year that they had 50-50, no one retired, okay? Not the boys and not the girls. Like something was changed in the system. So this is my thought. Like I can educate girls to be more self-confident, but I can also change the system that invites them and say, you have a place, now come. And when they have a place, they'll come. I think more, like it will take, and I think, in finance and business, it's a bit different. It's easy for me to talk about it because there's elections in one day for municipal elections. There's elections in one day for the state. It's one day that I need to put all my efforts in. In business, it's...
Actually, this is very helpful. I wasn't thinking about it like that, but also in publicly traded companies, we can say, okay, at least, I don't know, 40% women, and then women will come, as you mentioned.
Yeah, they will come because, think about Rwanda, they came because there was no one else, okay? They didn't think that they will be politicians, but they came because they had to do it. And when we change the system, so more women will be part of it and understand that it's their place. And I can say, I wasn't in the municipal of Jerusalem as a member, but I was part of a party. It's very boring to sit there. Yeah. Very, very boring. I can do much more better things in that time. But that's the place they decide about the budget of Jerusalem. So I need to sit there in this boring meeting, hearing this really like boring things, but I want to be there because that's the place they take the decisions. And women, they do lots of things volunteering, but they don't want to volunteer for boring things like boards.
Yeah, and don't forget that at the end of the day, women have a lot of responsibilities, caregiving responsibilities.
Yeah, that's why.
Still
I'll end with a small story, and this will be like, and then really take these magnets. I don't want to take them back home, okay? I have two boys, and one day my elder boy asked me, Ima, if you are dealing all the time with girls, why do we have only boys? Why did you give birth for boys? Okay, good question. And I said, first thing I explained him that we don't choose, right? We have two boys. Our neighbors, they have two girls. And we don't choose, and it's good that we don't choose. Like the nature gives us whatever the nature gives, or God, but then when we look on society, we'll see it's half men and half women. Nature, or 51%, but on the 1% I give up, okay? But, and then he told me, Mom, if the nature knows how to do 50-50, why does the government doesn't do that, okay? And so this is the next generation, okay? They understand that. And I'll tell you another thing, and I will end with that, that I told him. I'm not dealing with girls. I'm not dealing with women. I'm dealing with equality. Okay? I'm doing it. I told him, I'm doing my work in order that your world will be better. Okay? The world will be better for my son if there will be 50% women in the parliament or in the government or in the cabinet. It's not for girls, it's not for women. That's why, for me, it's hard this month, women's, because it's not Women's Month. Like, women has the right to vote. It's good, not for women, it's good for the society. Okay, it's good for all of us that women have the right to vote, and it will be good for all of us when we'll have 50% women in all the decision-making tables. So we'll end with that, and please take a magnet home. And you are invited to be part of 50-50.
Thank you so much, Yael.
And
Thank you,
Shabbat
everyone,
Shalom.
for coming.
And yeah, so
Take the magnets. Shabbat
Take the
Shalom.
magnet, give the, I don't want